Queen in the North. The land of the North was a harsh and unforgiving place, where winter never truly ended. For years, the people who called it home had lived their lives in relative peace, with occasional skirmishes between the various lords who ruled over the region. But all of that changed when rumors began to spread of a southern army marching towards the north with the intent to conquer it. The people of the north knew that they were facing an unprecedented threat, one that would require a strong and capable leader to guide them through the coming storm. That leader came in the form of Queen Lyanna, a fierce and determined woman who had taken up the mantle of leadership at a young age following the death of her father and the illness of her mother. She had proven herself to be a wise and just ruler, loved by her people for her compassion and feared by her enemies for her cunning. As soon as she heard the rumors of the southern army, Lyanna knew that she had to act quickly. She summoned her advisors to a council, and they gathered in the great hall of their land, the ancestral home of the main tribe and the seat of power in the north. The room was filled with the scent of burning logs and the sound of crackling fires, but there was an air of tension that hung over the gathering. Lyanna sat at the head of the table, her face set in a grim expression as she listened to her advisors discuss the rumors. "We've all heard the whispers," she said. "The southern lords are gathering their armies, preparing to march north. We need to be ready for them." There were murmurs of agreement from around the table. Lyanna's advisors were a mix of old and young men and women, but all of them were loyal to the queen. They knew that the North needed a strong leader, now more than ever. "We'll need to raise our own army," Lyanna continued. "Call up the banners, send word to the other lords. We'll need every sword we can get." There was a pause as the advisors looked at each other. They knew that raising an army would be no easy task. The north was vast and sparsely populated, and many of the lords were fiercely independent. But they also knew that Lyanna was not one to be deterred by a challenge. "Your Grace," one of the advisors said, "we'll need to be careful. We don't know how many soldiers the southern lords have or what their plans are. We can't just rush into battle blindly." Lyanna nodded. "I agree. We'll need to gather intelligence, send out scouts, see what we can learn about the enemy's movements." The advisors murmured their agreement, and the council continued for several hours. They discussed tactics, logistics, and the best way to rally the troops. Lyanna listened to their advice, weighing each suggestion carefully. When the council finally broke up, Lyanna retired to her chambers. She sat at her desk, poring over maps of the north, thinking about the challenges that lay ahead. She knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but she also knew that she was the only one who could lead her people through this crisis. As the days passed, Lyanna threw herself into preparations for war. She rode out to visit the other lords, rallying their support and coordinating their efforts. She sent scouts out into the wilderness, gathering information about the enemy's movements, and she worked tirelessly to ensure that her army was well fed, well equipped, and well trained. It was a grueling task, but Lyanna found strength in the knowledge that she was doing what needed to be done. She was a queen in the north, and her people were counting on her. Finally, the day arrived when the southern army was spotted marching towards the north. Lyanna rode out at the head of her army, her banner flying high above her. The army moved quickly, covering ground with impressive speed, but Lyanna knew that they were still at a disadvantage. The southern army was larger and better equipped, with more experienced soldiers and a greater variety of weapons. But Lyanna was determined to make up for that with strategy and cunning. As the two armies met on the battlefield, Lyanna put her plan into action. She had positioned her archers at the front of the army, raining arrows down on the enemy troops as they approached. The southern army faltered under the onslaught, but they quickly recovered and charged forward. Lyanna's infantry met the charge head-on, their swords and shields clashing against the enemy's weapons. The battle was brutal and bloody, with both sides suffering heavy losses. But Lyanna's army held the line, pushing back against the southern army and gaining ground. As the battle raged on, Lyanna spotted a gap in the enemy's defenses. She seized the opportunity, riding out with a small group of soldiers to attack the enemy's flank. The southern army was caught off guard, and they were quickly overwhelmed by Lyanna's soldiers. The tide of the battle turned, and the southern army began to retreat. Lyanna rode at the head of her army, chasing down the retreating soldiers and pushing them back towards their own territory. The battle was won, but Lyanna knew that the war was far from over. Over the following weeks and months, Lyanna and her army continued to fight against the southern army. They won battles, lost battles, and suffered from heavy losses. But through it all, Lyanna remained determined and resolute. She was a queen in the north, and she would do whatever it took to protect her people. In the end, the war was won, the southern army was defeated, and Lyanna emerged as a hero to her people. She had proven herself to be a capable and just ruler, one who was willing to fight for what she believed in. But as the dust settled and the people of the north began to rebuild, Lyanna knew that her work was far from over. There were still threats to her people, still challenges to overcome. But Lyanna was ready for whatever lay ahead. She was a queen in the north, and she would lead her people through any storm. The end. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please do not forget to hit the like button and share it with your friends and family. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more content like this. We'll see you in the next one.